This podcast is brought to you by Prism Brain Mapping, a revolution in understanding human behaviour. Move away from the norm. Good morning and welcome to our Prism podcast, Brain, Behaviour and Business. The focus of today's podcast is emotional intelligence, and I'm delighted to be joined by Maureen Chiana from the Mindsight Academy, a real advocate for emotional intelligence in the workplace and, of course, for life in general. Good morning, Maureen. How are you?
I'm very well. Good morning, Alex. I'm really excited to be with you today.
Oh, that's great to hear. That's really good. So before we start, Maureen, just tell our audience just a little bit about you.
So my name is Maureen Chiana, and I'm a neuro leadership and resilience consultant. I'm an award speaker, a trainer, and also a neuro coach. And my passion is really helping leaders all over the world achieve mental resilience so that they can increase their performance, productivity, and be able to lead at a high level. And I do this by leveraging on brain science of how to change behavior so that we can be the best that we can.
Wow, that sounds really, really intriguing. And so how does EI fit with what you do? Well, in fact, let's go back a bit before we talk about how EI fits. Maybe we ought to start by exploring what emotional intelligence actually is.
Yeah, emotional intelligence basically is you being able to manage your emotions. I would say, first of all, be able to understand your emotions, then be able to manage them, but also importantly, helping others understand their emotions and manage them as well. So that's a brief definition of emotional intelligence.
So understanding your emotions and the impact of those emotions, but also understanding and tuning into what others are feeling as well. Is that a fair summary?
Absolutely. Because one thing about emotions is that they kind of determine the actions that we take. So, and if you don't know how to manage those emotions, then it's going to have an impact on the decisions you make. It's going to have an impact on you as a leader and how you lead people, but also in your behavior patterns. So that's why emotional intelligence is so important.
Right. Okay. So our emotions, in effect, are dictating what other people see in terms of our behavior.
Absolutely. You see, one of the things about emotion, and I always like coming back to this, is that understanding what's going on in the brain is the key to really being able to understand the emotions. When we have an emotion, what happens in the brain is that the first place that it goes to take energy from to be able to enable us deal with that emotion or whatever situation it is the prefrontal cortex, which is the decision-making part of the brain. Mm-hmm. So that means that if you have an emotion that you're not controlling or not able to control, the first place affected would be your decision making. So that's why it's really important for you as a person to know how to manage yours, but also helping the people that you work with know how to manage theirs because of the impact that it has on anything that you're doing, how you communicate, how you make decisions, how you problem solve, how you deal with pressure. All those are what are going to be affected. And for me, the key for leadership basically is people being able to be conscious leaders. So bringing it back to understanding, how am I feeling? Why am I feeling the way I do? And what can I do about it?
Okay. So the brain, in effect, is driving our behavior because of the emotions that we're feeling. If you like, it's capturing the energy and driving out behaviors as a consequence of that, behaviors that we're probably not even conscious of.
Absolutely. Because a lot of, the science shows that 90% of what we do is it's from our subconscious brain. So that's the part of the brain that we're not even aware of. And it's that default mode that we get into. And the brain has to do that to be able to conserve energy. If not, our brain will be so tired just dealing with everyday life, like drinking a cup of tea or doing anything, normal routines. And if that's the case, that means that a lot of reactions or how we respond or how we behave or, all those little things are really coming from the subconscious brain. So in most of the time, we're not even aware of them. And that's why emotional intelligence is so important, because what it then does is kind of puts you back into being in control of what's going on in your brain. So being in control of your thoughts, being in control of your emotions, because it's the thoughts that will create the emotions. These emotions then create the actions you take that then becomes your behavior or habit. And that's why it's really important to come back to basics of really understanding yourself first.
Okay, good. So let's focus on that then. So how do you help people become aware of their emotions, and then, of course, once they are aware, do something about it?
I use different ways. Like I'm a coach, I'm a trainer. And one of the things that I do as well is really getting people to understand. I always come back to the science of it. How does the brain work? What is the function of the brain? The brain is there to protect us from threats, basically. And I find that once people understand what's going on in the brain, it just gives them so much power to be able to then take the necessary actions. So sometimes it's training, in terms of giving people the information. But you see, training is not enough, because you can give people information, but then when they're confronted with issues, it's how they then apply that training that becomes the problem. And that's why a lot of times I add what I call neuro coaching, which is the brain-based coaching, to give people the skills to be able to now understand what to do. And the first place to start is self-awareness, which is the first point of emotional intelligence, is that awareness of yourself. It's being able to understand how you feel, why you're feeling the way you are, and what you can now do about it. And this could be for you as a person in terms of your personal life, your work, when you're at work, when you're dealing with people, but also even just knowing how to attract the right people to you, how to influence your team, when you're going through change, what do you do? How do you get people on board? So these are the things that I do. So the main ways is really the training and the neuro coaching.
Okay. So let's put that into practice then. So, Maureen, I have to have a difficult conversation, perhaps with a client who perhaps it's a conversation that I know I'm going to find quite challenging. There are all sorts of emotions that come to sort of the surface as a consequence of that. So I'm aware of those emotions. I'm aware that I don't want to necessarily have this conversation with the client. I'm going to find it frustrating. I have those emotions. So how do I deal with them? What do I do?
Okay. Now, one of the first things I always do, and you'll be pleased with this, Alex, is that when I'm working with people, I get them to do the brain mapping diagnostics, the PRISM brain mapping diagnostics. For me, that is always the place to start. And I was exceptionally pleased when I discovered it, because it's really made a whole difference to my practice. So I find that doing that first kind of opens the conversation for us to now have in terms of, okay, so this is the way I'm feeling. This is why I'm feeling this way. And it's always a good place to start, because I can give you an answer now and say, okay, yeah, the leader goes about doing this way or doing that. But it's important first and foremost for them to first, to understand why they're feeling that way. And that only comes out from when we do this prison diagnostics. We then analyze it, and I'm able to ask them lots of questions. And from there, it's now looking at the person that they need to have that conversation with as well. Where do they fit in? Who are they? What kind of people are they? Because you have to deal with people at a very personal level. And knowing this then makes a difference to how you communicate with that person. I'll give you an example. There's someone that I'm working with currently, and the first thing that they did was the prison brain mapping diagnostics, and it was so fantastic because before we did that, the conversations we were having were so different because a lot of people don't know how to think or don't know how to reflect on themselves. And this is what I found with the diagnostics. So it was able to, because he answered the question, so it was much easier to now use that to have that conversation with him. And then we could then go about how he then approached this member of staff that he was having issues with, or how to communicate to them. Because this other member of the team that he really needed to speak to had a very strong personality, very strong, very, I would say, very, what we would say, very monitoring, very authoritative, wanting their own way. So it's how do you deal with someone like that? And that was where it was good, because his emotions in terms of second guessing himself, wanting to be the leader, showing himself as the boss, all came through. And we're able to deal with this, bringing it back to, at the end of the day, you have to learn how to listen. And I think that was the problem that was coming across. The team felt that he wasn't listening to them. So, and because they felt he wasn't listening, they now had to assert themselves even more so that they could be heard. And this is where it then became more useful. So when he got into that situation where he was, somebody said something that either offended him, or somebody said something, or he gave an instruction and they were opposing it, it was then being able to step back, hold him, put the brakes on the brain and ask himself those questions. And he does that so well now that, just taking that time of putting that brake and saying, okay, why am I feeling this way? Why am I getting upset? Should I need to get upset? What do I need to do to really get them to understand where I'm coming from? Do I need to listen? Do I need to speak? Do I need to call them, do it one-to-one? It's just, being able to ask those questions that will guide you to taking the right action.
Okay. So the emotion triggers a thought process along the lines of, why am I feeling like this? Why do I have this emotion? That then allows you to, first of all, understand why that emotion is there, but secondly, go through a series of options that allows you to perhaps behave differently in the situation that's causing that emotion. Would that be a fair summary? Absolutely.
And it's the behaving differently or how you behave that is the key. Because a lot of times subconsciously what we do is just have a reaction to it or react. But it's now being able to actually ask yourself those questions, look inwardly first before you start reacting or responding. And you find that most times you might not end up reacting. You'll be in a position where you can respond, which is a more powerful position than just reacting to something somebody says or does. And what I find a lot is that being able to now manage your own emotions first and foremost will give you the opportunity to then, decide what to do. Do I need to respond to this, or do I need to stop? Do I need to take time out? Yesterday I was giving a talk and I said it's just a typical example is when somebody sends you an email that really winds you up. And honestly, and the first thing people do is go type a response. And I think where emotional intelligence becomes so useful is that, yes, you could type that response, but it's now knowing, okay, I'm not going to send this. I'm going to leave it, take a break, come back to it and read it again before I press send. And it's that taking that control back that makes the whole, gives you more of the power, because you find that once you stop, you're able to now manage that emotion by asking the questions. Why did I get upset? Now, where has this come from? Should I actually call this person instead of sending this email? Do I need to, it's just really being able to deal with things differently. So you managing your own behavior in the process and then helping other people manage theirs as well.
Yes, that makes so much sense. And you used the phrase earlier, conscious leaders, which really rings true, because it's about having that consciousness, that awareness as a leader that actually those emotions mean something. Those emotions are there for a reason. And because you've got those emotions, you can trigger different responses to the situation. So I really like that phrase, conscious leaders. I think it sort of sums up that awareness that leaders must have. So looking at the next step then, so you can be conscious, aware of your own feelings and your emotions. How do you tune into others?
Okay, this is the good bit, because one of the areas in emotional intelligence which goes into the interpersonal relationship is the empathy. It's the how to have better, more positive relationships with people. So you see, once you're able to understand yourself, it then helps you understand or put yourself in other people's shoes in a way, and also helps you to lead more humanly, so that you now remember that you're actually leading human beings, or you're dealing with human beings. And for when I got into neuro leadership, one of the first things that I learned was knowing how to manage my expectations of others. Because a lot of times you find that what really gets us upset is not even what other people have done. It's more the expectations that we have of others. And when that is not fulfilled, it then creates the emotion in us. So, and this is really important in being able to interact with others effectively. And I think the bottom line comes down to being or aiming to have those positive relationships with anyone. Because once you come from that perspective, it really helps you in terms of how you interact with people, how you form those relationships, how you respond to what other people do and say. And that's really the big chunk of emotional intelligence. It's giving you that ability to be more in tune, or to what other people are feeling and what other people are going through, as opposed to just making a blank judgments about things.
Okay, because the only way you could see emotions is through how people are behaving. So is there not a danger that you're seeing a set of behaviors and making an assumption about what that means in terms of someone's emotions?
Yeah, that's why I said that a lot. That's why you need to manage those expectations. And it comes down to be able to find out, most of the time, is to have conversations, is to speak to people, because that's the only way you can really find out what is going on with them. And also one of the other things is how they perceive you. So if we're talking about leaders, somebody who is leading a team, for your people to open up to you, they've got to believe that you care. And that's one of the things. How do you then show that you care? So it's not so much as just noticing their behavior, because a lot of times it is difficult, like you said, to really determine what is causing a behavior. And that, coming back to why I always go back to the PRISM diagnosis at the beginning, is because a lot of times you don't even know why you are behaving the way you are anyway. So that's why it's important to go back there. But in terms of how you work with people, It's one, how you behave with them, how they perceive you, and being able to have open conversations with them. I'll give an example of a leader that I was working with once, and he hated he hated people giving him feedback or criticizing him, couldn't deal with it at all. And because of that, he did not give his team feedback. He did not give them any form of feedback. So the only time they heard how well they are performing is when they had their annual performance review, which was really awful. So it was now getting him to be open, one, to receiving feedback, and now changing, reframing how he interpreted feedback. So it's coming back to self first. And one of the things I got him to do was to actually tell his team to give him feedback, to whether it's positive or negative. And I said initially it will hurt because it's something that it's new. And with time, it became, he was so used to it, and it became really positive for him. And because they could give him feedback, it then became easy for him to critique them, to critique their work, but doing it positively because he knew how it felt himself.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. So just staying with that example, what did the leader learn from that whole process? What came out in terms of how that leader is now operating?
For him in particular, because he was the team, it was a real disconnect between him and the team. And when I came in, the main issue was really underperformance, lack of motivation in the team, lack of team engagement. But once we were able to implement this, and it got to a stage where the team were now, it was a complete change of dynamics. Totally a complete change of how they viewed him, and the working relationship became more positive. And with time, what then happened is that he did not even need to ask. They were actually doing what they needed to do and going over and beyond what they needed to do without him even asking. And there was once he had to really work with one of the team members, literally having to micromanage them. Before, that would have been a very negative experience, but it turned out to be a really positive one for both of them. Because from that process, that other team member got to learn a lot about himself and got to find out things that he never imagined he could do before. And the manager himself was, it was so good because that other person ended up being working on one of the big projects that they had, and that would never have happened. So it really improved their performance. It improved their engagement as a team. And they went on to be one of the higher performing departments in that organization. So it really makes a huge difference. And it was just this one tiny action of just being open. And it just spirals out because, there's a saying, emotions are contagion. So it's just one emotion that can lead to a lot of other things. And the brain, which is so complex, it's so imaginative that one action you take could actually lead somebody thinking a lot of interesting things that were completely far away from what you intended it to mean. So that's why being open is so important, and being able to have those conversations, even as painful as they are initially, really can make a huge difference.
So positive relationships, that ability to build relationships with people, relationships that are positives, relationships where you can listen effectively, they're sort of key attributes of a leader that's quite emotionally aware. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I think there's almost some top tips here, Maureen, that you could pass on to leaders, in fact, to anybody, and I want to explore that a bit later. Some top tips that would make a leader more effective. We've definitely picked up being self-aware, listening, build positive relationships. Are there any others?
Empathy is a massive one, which I think doesn't exist much, unfortunately, and it's one that really goes a long way. And the fact is that they're all intertwined together in terms of the relationship and being empathetic, and and just really caring about people. But empathy is a great one. But also, in terms of, you have organizations, especially now, that are going through a lot of change, being able to communicate effectively is so important. And that communication is where things like empathy comes in, because when you're communicating with people with the mindset that you've got to really be mindful of how they feel, or how they're going to take this, is so important as well. So these are really, I would say, the key factors that you need. One, to be able to get people on your side, to be able to be more influential in what you're doing, are those communication skills. And communication skills is not just what you're saying; it's also you being a good listener as well. Not just, and also how you communicate. Do you need to make a phone call? Does it need to be a Zoom call now? When we were working in the office, or go back to the office, do you need to call them in and have a conversation, or take them out for a coffee, or sit in the cafe? It's just really being aware of how you talk to people and how you communicate with them, so that it's not just one rule for everyone.
That makes so much sense. So create the right environment for the right conversation, and be prepared to listen as a key part of your communication. Makes so much sense. And in terms of where we are now, Maureen, we're not working in offices. We are more disparate, if you like, in terms of how we're working together. How is emotional intelligence coming to the fore in this current situation?
I think the first thing basically would be yourself, that self-awareness, I think, and the self-management, because what a lot of people are going through now is the anxiety, it's the worry, it's the uncertainty of what's going on. And emotional intelligence, I believe, is really key here, because I've spoken to so many business owners and people who are just worried about the unknown, worried about the lack of control as well. And these are, one thing I'll say is, there's no point in worrying about what you can control, because there's nothing you can do about it. So try and put into place things that you can control, and then work with those. So, and also reframing the limiting talk that you're saying. So, for example, instead of focusing on the challenges that you're facing, try and focus on the opportunities that are out there. How can you scale? How can you even change your business? How can you adapt to what's going on? Do you need to review your goals and change your priorities? It's just really being more open-minded to what's going on and looking out for opportunities. I was speaking to someone once who was into public speaking, and this was at the early part of the lockdown. And it was a case of, okay, with all this now, I don't know what I'm going to do. Public speaking, you can't be face to face. And I said, but you can do virtual speaking. There are things, it's taking the business online and start looking for how you can speak online. And we went through a few options that he could pick on. And there's so many ways you can just start looking at different opportunities. But I think the key is to, first of all, manage your own emotions so that you don't end up getting anxious. Because coming back to what I said about the brain, once the emotional center is activated, that prefrontal cortex, your conscious brain, the thinking brain, gets deactivated. So it's so important to, one, manage your emotions and build up that mental resilience. And that's where emotional intelligence is so important. And building resilience doesn't mean that, oh, yes, I'm fine, everything is okay. No, it's actually being able to bounce back or come back or adjust yourself or adapt to things and know ways of being able to change what you're doing, to look at different options. That's what resilience is about. It's just not kind of accepting defeat and sitting down there.
So true. So true. Very, very good indeed. So we've talked a lot about emotional intelligence and the connection to leaders and managers, but what about everybody else? How do they benefit from emotional intelligence?
I'll start by saying this, Alex. Every single person is a leader. I always say, because when we talk about leadership, a lot of people feel that, okay, I don't lead a team, so I'm not a leader. And I always say, see, if you're not leading a team, you're a leader in your home, either if you've got a family, or even if you don't have anyone to lead, you're a leader to yourself. It's leading your own life. So every single person is a leader. And, what we've discussed about, it might not apply in terms of you leading people, but it will apply in terms of the relationships you have with people, with your friends, with your family. Every day we hear of problems between couples, between relationships, between family members, between friends. These are all the things that emotional intelligence comes in handy, because at the end of the day, every single one has a brain. We all have a brain. And emotions is really what drives our behaviors. So that means if you have a brain, you need emotional intelligence to be able to achieve success in your life, build those positive relationships, be able to interact well with people, and get the best out of yourself and of others that you interact with.
Wow, that is so insightful. So in effect, everyone is a leader. Everyone needs to manage their own emotions for better relationships, not just at work, but in life in general. That's a really good point to end. Maureen, thank you ever so much. It's been really insightful and lots of food for thought, I'm sure, for our listeners. And really grateful for you spending the time with us today. Thank you.
No, you're very welcome.
Thank you for listening to this podcast brought to you by Prism Brain Mapping, the online behavioural profiling tool for leadership, coaching, recruitment, team building, in fact, anything involving human behaviour. Please see our website, prismbrainmapping.com, for more information.